In this video, we're going to tie the Elk Hair Caddis. This is one of the most popular patterns. It was initially actually tied as a wet fly pattern by a gentleman named Al Troth, and it was invented in 1957 in central Pennsylvania. And he actually tied this to imitate the caddis flies on the Loyal Sock Creek, which is right outside of Williamsport, Pennsylvania. And that the pattern became very popular. I think in the 1978, one of the 78 issues of Fly Tire magazine, it was featured, and it just kind of blew up from there. And Mr. Troth ended up moving out to Montana, and he took that pattern with him, and it became a popular pattern out west also. This is also one of the FFI silver level patterns, one of the required patterns. And so we're going to go through some of those guidelines as we tie it, and just kind of give you an idea of what the evaluators might be looking for if you decide to go through the FFI skills award levels. So let's look at the materials. All right, so it's kind of a jumbled mess here, but we'll get through it. The body, we're going to use a super fine dubbing in tan. Now the FFI recipe calls for you can use either a synthetic like superfine or a natural dubbing in tan, so you can use either or. My thread is Semperfli. It's a 12/0 thread in tan. Now my ribbing is a fine gold wire. My hackle is going to be a brown. This is a brown rooster saddle. This is more of a furnace, but I'm gonna pick a feather out of there that is more solid brown than having that black streak in the center, like the pattern like the example I'm showing you. And then the wing is going to be deer hair. Now the recipe for the FFI calls for elk hair to be used. So if you are going to substitute deer hair, I think it's probably appropriate, but you would want to check with your evaluator to make sure that that substitution is okay with them before you submit the flies. So with that said, let's go and tie the pattern. All right, so we're gonna take this out. We're gonna put a size 12 dry fly, standard dry fly hook in the vise, and that's what's required for the FFI. That's what they ask for is a size 12 pattern. So that's what we're gonna use. First thing we're going to do is we're going to take our thread and we're going to start and put a layer of thread about halfway down the hook shank, trim off, and then we can come back up. Now we're going to take our wire. This is our ribbing, and we're going to tie this in. I want it tied on the far side of the hook shank, side away from me, more towards the bottom. So I'm going to put it in that position. I'm going to spin my thread counterclockwise. So whenever I take my first wrap, it's going to jump towards my material and not away from it. And a loose wrap just to capture it. And then we can start tying it. We're going to hold it in the position that we want it. And we're just going to do touching wraps back to where the bend starts. And then we're going to come up to about that halfway mark. And we're going to start with our dubbing. Now we're using a superfine dubbing. Now if the FFI recipe calls for this to be the body to be done in a reverse taper. In other words, it should be thicker towards the rear, thinner up front. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to actually attempt to do that with the thread or with the dubbing. We're going to put a little bit heavier dubbing at the beginning of our noodle and kind of taper that down towards the rear. Now, that doesn't mean we're going to put a big bulky layer of dubbing down. It just means we're using a little bit more on the top of the noodle than we are the bottom. But it's still a tightly wound body. Now we have some bare hook thread there, so we're going to start wrapping back. I have a noodle that's probably 2.5 inches long. We're going to wrap back and we're gonna kind of time it. So our first wrap with the dubbing will be right where the bend of the hook starts. and that's going to be thicker there. So we're going to do touching wraps. Tighten that up if we need to. And as we come down, we're seeing how that taper is forming, that reverse taper. We're going to add a little bit more dubbing. This time we're just going to add a normal amount. We're just very little dubbing. In other words, that's going to complete that reverse taper. Push that up. I'm just going to go forward. We're going to stop about a good eye length behind the hook eye, and you see that's sort of it's a little bit thicker in the back and thinner in the front. Not much, but it is there. All right, so now we're going to tie in our hackle, and I'm using a size 12 hackle, which should give you about 1.5 times the hook gap, which is what's required. And so I'm going to show you how I prepare that. I'm going to pull out some and show some bare hackle stem, and then with the shiny side facing me, I'm going on the very top. I'm going to pull out about a dozen fibers. So I have that bare on top and there's fibers on the bottom, and that'll ensure when we make that first wrap of hackle, the first wrap's going to be bare hook stem to start, and it's going to make sure that hackle, when it does start to show, it's going to be 90 degrees from the hook shank, and it's not going to flare to the left or right. We're going to head and tie that in on our side of the hook shank at a slight angle. Tie that in with tight wraps. Now we're ready to wrap our hackle. Now we're going to do one complete wrap at the front, and then we're going to do evenly spaced wraps moving back, just like we did with the like you would do with a woolly bugger. It's really the same. It's just a little bit smaller of a hook. That's all. So one complete wrap of, you can see how that went 90 degrees with the hook shank. So that looks good. Now we're going to start doing evenly spaced wraps moving back. One behind the other, just so I'm looking at the gap in between. I'm trying to make sure I have the same amount of gap. And we're going to finish up right there at the bend. And then as we do, we're going to actually take our wire and we're going to chase that as we make that last wrap. And we're going to tie that in right there at the bend with one wrap. And then we're going to add a second tie-in wrap right in front of the first. So we should have two tie-in wraps right beside each other. I don't know if you can see that, but they're there. And that is one of the requirements for the FFI. And then once you have that, you can just take your hackle, if you're brave, and just pull that out. Now we can start moving forward. Now that we have our two wraps, we can start moving forward evenly spaced up through the hackle. And we want to make sure that we're capturing the hackle stem at the body. So we want to make sure that we're making this fly really durable, and wiggling that wire as we go through. We'll make sure that it doesn't capture any hackle fibers. And if you do, just pick them out. All right, so when I tie in my wire, I'll show you how I do it. I actually just twist my wire and my thread together, and then I just bring up and wrap. And now what that does is that just locks that wire right in place really well. And then I'm going to bring up my bobbin right to the shank and make it kind of tight, and I'm just going to helicopter that wire out. Okay, and we got some stray fiber there. We're going to trim that out. We're going to look at the back and how does that look, and that looks pretty good. We can take our bodkin and just kind of clean that up a little bit and show it. Yeah, that gives us a pretty good look. And our hackle is about 1.5 times the hook gap, so that looks good. Now all we're left is our wing. Now, before I do that, I'm actually going to take my scissors and I'm going to give it a little bit. I'm going to angle it at the same angle as the hook eye, and I'm going to start at an angle up, and I'm just going to give it a haircut. And what that's going to do, that's going to allow that wing, it's going to give that wing room to lay down. Otherwise, it would flare up too much. So that just gives that wing room to lay down on top of the hackle. So we're going to take our deer hair and we're going to trim out a piece that when it's completely collapsed, it's about the size, half the size of a #2 pencil when you're pinching it. So it's not much, not a lot less than you need. If you have too big of a wing, too thick of a wing, it's going to roll whenever you tie it in. So if you're having your wing roll on you, #1, use tighter wraps, but #2, maybe use a little bit less wing, and that should help. Putting in our hair stacker, and we're just going to give it a couple taps to even the tips. Now we pull that out and you see those tips are even. Now we're going to show one trick is when you take your whatever you're stacking out of a hair stacker, you always want to take it out so the tips are facing the direction that you're going to tie them in. So if I was going to tie them the other direction, I would just turn my hair stacker around. But since I'm tying the tips in the back, I'm going to pull them out. That way I'm not transferring so much in my hands, and it's not going to make my tips uneven. And I forgot to mention that you really want to clean out all the under fur and anything, any short fibers and all the under fur before you stack, because that'll make the whole process a lot easier. Now I'm going to measure, and we want our wing to be the length of the whole hook, including the eye. So we're going to go right to the bend, and that's where we want. So we're going to mark that. And then what I do here is I'm going to take my scissors, and I'm going to trim that. I'm going to trim that short. That's automatically going to form our head. So we're going to put that up against the hook shank. We're going to take a pinch wrap, and we're going to pull straight down. We want to keep that wing on top of the hook shank. We let go. We're going to check our wing for length, and that looks good. Now at the FFI program, there needs to be a clear separation between the wing and the head, and it should be about half the length of the hook eye. So that's what we're going to do here. We're creating that separation, which you can see we did. Now we can pull that up, and we can come forward. If you do that right, that'll form you that nice head that we're looking for. And the head should be at roughly the same angle as your wing and then your eye of the hook. And this needs a little bit of trimming, but it's not a terrible head. And then lastly, what we can do is we can whip finish. Couple turns, you don't need a lot. 3 or 4 turn whip finish is plenty. And we'll finish up with a drop of head cement right on the wing, the thread wraps there that separates, and then also a little bit at the head to cover our thread wraps. That's the pattern. We kind of talked through how it should be tied if you're going to be evaluated by the FFF. If you're not, then use those as guidelines also, because they do create a pretty good looking fly, pretty good looking caddis. You might do a little bit of, sometimes when you deal with deer hair, most of the time you're going to have a little bit of trim work to do. Lastly, we're going to inspect this wing to make sure that it's completely on top of the hook shank, and that's pretty good. That looks pretty good. So that's all. That's the pattern. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments, and I'll try to answer them as quickly as I can. And yeah, have a good evening.